G'day Bomber fans, deja vu. The Dons get off to a slow start. We came home, got the crowd up and about, and then struggled to get over the line. It's back-to-back losses in similar ways. This one probably stings a bit more because it's against the Blues, our rivals. It's a funny old game though. Plenty of disappointment, but I think it paints a pretty interesting picture for both these clubs. I think there's a bit to talk about with this game, and it's funny. I think this game has created a really weird vibe for both fan bases. Fans don't know whether to be happy or sad from both teams. It is a bit goofy. But yeah, let's get into it. Remember to leave your votes down below. Quarter by quarter recap. It was another slow start. Not the first time we've gotten off, the game recap like this. Our opponents just got going and we did not. They kicked the first 4 goals of the match, 6 of the first 7. It was 40-7 at the first break. The one highlight was the debut goal from Luman Lawal. Many didn't think he'd be playing this game or this year. But it was great to see him out there taking his moment, getting the crowd up and about. It was really good to see, a rare highlight for a pretty boring quarter for the Bombers. The second, the break was really needed. You could see the reset, the refocus, and we entered the game. Unfortunately, that was just the way we should have been playing from the get-go, because the battle really did start in the second. Orazio got the Blues off to a 40-point lead, but halfway through we got into our groove, after holding them up well in defence. Caldwell nailed a set shot. Archie Perkins converted not long after. There was a settler from the Blues, but Wright gave us a real sniff after the siren. We were still down, but you could tell that we were in the game. It was a 28-point halftime margin. The third quarter was great. That was our best footy of the night. There was some chaos involved, but it was fun to watch. Some of those passages down the middle of the ground were pretty hectic, and the pressure was awesome. Guelphy got it started in the first minute. Peter Wright took control during as well. We kicked 4 goals to 1. We were just 11 points down at the final break. And unfortunately, we just did not get there in the end. The Blues kicked the first 2 goals of the quarter, 23 points up. And with about 10 minutes left, you feel the momentum shift. Gresham kicks a lucky one. Martin sells the candy to kick a beauty. And in game 100, Xavier Dersma gets up to within a kick. But it was too little too late. The Blues held firm, scraping over the line in a tight-fought 8-point win. So let's talk about this game of footy. Where did the Blues win it? All right, well, realistically, that first quarter was the reason Carlton won. I thought most of the game was a real arm wrestle that were the last 3 quarters. And to be fair, we won every quarter, but it wasn't like we were dominating. I feel like that was the way it should have been, those 3 quarters. There were periods where we were on top, a few little goal streaks, but there was one big period where the Blues were on top, a whole quarter, in fact. And when they were on top, they were just scoring easier. They were restricting us. You could say we were slow to start. We were very sloppy early, but I thought the Blues were also really hot. Their pressure around the ball was just too much to handle sometimes. It was really good. I thought most of this game was a good, solid contest, and that is what makes the start so frustrating, because we were just so out of it. The way I see it, I thought we were the better team out there for the most part. Not the team that deserved to win. I think the Blues looked better at their best. But when both teams were gritting it out and having a proper crack at the same time, we were the team that looked in more control. I don't know if you guys got that feeling. The scoreboard probably didn't help, but for me, that was one quarter that we were just completely out of the game for, and then the rest we were probably the better looking side. That's how I felt it played out. One thing that remained a pretty big factor during the game though, and I think you could so clearly tell that one team was out there up against it at selection, and it's not an excuse. I think we could have won that game. I don't think Carlton are a great team. I think it's an excuse against the Lions, but we could have won this game. But yeah, some of the matchups, I mean, Jackson Pryor was on Hudson O'Keefe. Pryor is under 190 centimeters tall. O'Keefe is over 2 meters tall. There was some contests that he just could not possibly win because of the height difference. Angus Clark was on McGovern. That's a skinny little 3-gamer playing on Mitch McGovern. There were just matchups that in an ideal world would not be matchups. And Merritt in the back half again. There's a reason why we're doing these things. Scott isn't just choosing to do this. There are just things that we're being forced to do at selection. And whereas most of the game on paper was even, I thought the aerial game was always working in Carlton's favour. They just had height that we do not currently have, and it's not really something we can probably fix right now. I was praying for rain and it didn't come. And this is just going to be an issue in the next few weeks. We are probably going to give a debut to a mid-season draftee, play them out of position. But yeah, it's why the mid-season draft was an interesting one, because we focused on the future, we brought in forwards, and it was always going to make this month tough. The Blues were just better in the air, 50 more marks, 16-7 contested marks, And marks are important, you know, they give you control with ball in hand. That means there were 50 more times in this game where the Blues had control of the footy and could take time with it without being tackled. And maybe that was a reason for the happy handball, or the handball happy play style. You know, that could well have been a directive. It did look overdone. It was pretty frustrating. But that may have been to avoid giving Carlton control through their aerial advantage, which they 100% had. You know, I know that play style, the handball happy play style, was a big complaint. Just the overuse of it was real. But I think that was a plan, you know, to get the game back on our terms. And it's interesting because you can see how that could work if we were just the tiniest bit slicker. And I think for any Carlton fans watching, I'm sure that they would love to say that the reason for the closer than desired result was Essendon having a standout, you know, knockout performance. But the fact of the matter is, I actually thought we were not even really close to our best. You know, I thought that despite the hard-fought performance, we were clearly not properly clicking. You know, we were wasteful at times. Our ball movement was interesting. There were some unbelievable decisions made, and that is not in a good way. You know, it was goofy footy at times. We also had key players below their best. It was a really fun and energetic game of footy, but I think both teams would hold their hand up and say that they could have been a lot better. And that is important. You know, I thought last week we had to play out of our skin to be contending against the Lions. This week we had levels we could go to but still contended and walked away thinking we should have won. But yeah, Merritt was obviously tagged out of the game really well. Caddy didn't get going. I thought Roberts played a bad game, and that is the first time I've ever said that. You know, Roberts having his first bad game for the club. It's good to know he's human. But no, there were plenty of players below their best. There's clearly room for improvement in some areas right now. Ones that can't be fixed because of personnel, but ones that can be fixed as well. So it's a bit of a learning experience for a few of these guys. All right, I want to talk about where these two teams are placed right now. Because I said at the start of the video it was a goofy vibe. It was a weird vibe with the fans. I don't think I'm happy with the performance, but I think I'm probably happier than some Carlton fans should be. You know, I think most neutrals that watched that game would leave it thinking that Essendon were on a better path than Carlton. And that's the funny thing with football, you know, and just sport in general. But, you know, Carlton win the game. Their fans get to enjoy the 4 points. But I'm pretty comfortable saying that we're in a better place than the Blues right now. You know, it's just where these teams are at. This is unfortunately a period where most teams that we go up against will be better than us, you know. But, you know, to start the year, Carlton, you know, they're trying to win flags. They line up with a team that's close to 27 years old on average tonight, the third oldest in the comp this round. We line up with a team that's 24.5 years old on average, the youngest in the comp this round. And you know, and that's also with us playing the 90-year-old Todd Goldstein and Ruck. So we are so clearly just in different places. You know, you have two teams at very different parts of their list build. But despite that, you know, we're closer than what we should be to the Blues. And I know it's weird to say after a loss, but I think this game proved to me that we are at least on a better track than Carlton are, you know. This was a really valuable game for a lot of these young players too, you know. Caddy, Roberts, Kako, we've got a lot of young players. Johnson, Lual, Day Wicks. These guys are all in the Angus Clark. They're all in their first and second year at the club. They haven't played in finals, obviously. So when they next do it, it'll be their first time. These types of games against rivals, big crowds, it is great to get that into them as we build towards the future. It's the little things like that we are celebrating as a fan base, whereas the Blues are realising that they're around that middle of the table range with us, despite, you know, their list build suggesting they should be challenging for flags. I think this game proved exactly where both these teams are at for season 2025, and I think the future as well. And I don't think it's good news if you're hyped about finals. All right, some bad news. Sam Durham, yeah, look, it's hard to say if he will get suspended or not. It's always a lottery, but in my opinion, I think he probably should get suspended. And I know that might be controversial to say on an Essendon channel. I just think there isn't really a need to bump there. And, you know, when we talk about how the bump is dead, it is not about these acts. I think these are the acts we need to cut out of the game. You know, I think he's doing more than just protecting his body. He is electing to bump and collects Chera high in the process. I think for the game itself, I'd probably say Durham should be suspended, and I'd honestly be annoyed if he isn't. You know, and that's weird to say as an Essendon fan. So that is decided today. He probably won't play against the Cats next week. I don't know how long he'll be suspended for. But yeah, aside from that, there were also some poor performances which might warrant a team change, because there were some goodies in the VFL, and I'll have that video out tomorrow, hopefully. But Archie Perkins getting subbed, unfortunately he's just not in form right now, and it sucks because I really liked him to start the year. I thought he was having a proper underrated season. But yeah, subbed off. I thought Ben Hobbs battled, but was ultimately not really able to be a huge factor in the game when he wasn't defending. De Koning had a huge game on Goldie, who's tiring a bit. I think if there were to be any unforced changes, those three could possibly be given a stint in the resis. Those were the bads from this game. I should probably balance it out with some goods, though. Now, there were some really good things to take out of this game. Some of our footy at its best was genuinely good. And the way I see it, right, for 3 quarters, we have the crowd up and about. We're exciting our fans. It is close, but it isn't dull footy like we've played recently. There was dare and reward. I know we got the loss, but all it takes is 2 more goals, and we're talking about this game very differently, and we're talking about how well we played, so that is good. And I really liked how involved our kids were at important times. Lowell kicking his first goal to get us off the mark was good. I liked his performance, I wouldn't mind him seeing him again at AFL level. Zach Johnson had a strong game, and I liked that he was taking the game on late as well. Angus Clark had some really good defensive moments. He was on Mitch McGovern for most of the game. Someone who was really underrated, Archer Day Wicks. I thought he was really good coming on as a sub. I thought that was his best game for the club, I think. He played his role really well. Yeah, it was good to see the kids up and about, And of course, there were some really strong performances from guys like Martin and Caldwell and Durham and Wright up forward. They deserve a bit of love. But the back six, this was a tough game for them to defend in. It's probably the worst back six I've seen us field. And I reckon we're missing 4 of our best 6 there. But we kept the Blues to a reasonable score after a big first quarter too. 5 goals in the last 3 for Carlton. Big mismatches, but we managed it well. And it's interesting to see how we cope against the Cats now, because that could be ugly. But yeah, to sum this game up, it is a loss, but it is just where we are. I think this was expected. I think we probably should have won if it weren't for a slow start. So that is now something we just have to cut out of the game, because we are in these matches and just probably losing them from those first quarters. And it is admirable to come back from behind and make a fight out of a game that looks lost early. I'll give the boys credit for that. But there comes a point where we just have to be critical of the club and its performances. And I don't think I'm glass half empty here. I think I'm probably more positive than negative after this game. But that first quarter nap sesh in front of 80,000 fans is not what we want to see. There are things that we just need to cut out of the game, which of course means that there was plenty that we learned. And now it's all about making those experiences and learnings productive and developing the boys through it. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the win, but it doesn't change the way I feel about how the game played out. 2 kicks of the footy shifts the vibes a lot. And I think if we're popping off in the comments, we're winning, but we don't. The initial reaction is obviously probably frustration, but when you think about the game and how it played out, I think for where we are at, it is okay. We are clearly challenging, and now the big test is fighting out one of these next 2 games against Geelong, which is scary, and then Fremantle and Perth, which is also scary. I think it's any day until a belting comes. I can sniff it out. It's around the corner. But no, I'd like to see us keep challenging and fighting like this, because it's good to see. But yeah, let's get on to the votes before we close this out. 1 vote to 2 meter Peter. He is putting together a really underrated season. He's been super important to us while we miss our rucks and Langford. He kicked 3 goals. He kept Wiedering busy but quiet. Rucked for large parts of the game. Really good. 2 votes to the milestone man, Xavier Dersma, in game 100. I thought he was great. I was questioning why he wasn't on the same wing as Akers for parts of the night, but then I saw a real battle between the opposite sides, trying to impact in their own way. And Akers was better early, but Dersma was huge for us when we needed him to be. It was good to watch both of the 2 of the best wingers in the comp go at it. Big grabs, big goal. He dislocated his shoulder, popped it back into place. It was really good. But 3 votes to Nick Martin. This guy's in serious form. He was out of the midfield, kind of swapping around defence in the forward line. And it shows how dangerous he is wherever he is sat, because I'm fairly sure that was his 3rd best on ground performance in a row. And the role player has to go to Will Setterfield. He shut down Paddy Cripps out of the game, kept him to his lowest disposal tally in I don't know how long. Yeah, he was great. I thought Caldwell was stiff, but aside from that, I can't think of anyone else who could be in the votes. And that's what I talked about in the preview. If the Blues have more of the better players on the park, they win. And in the end, Walsh, De Koning, Akers, even Hewitt, the forwards, Motlop and Curnow, yeah, I don't think we deserved to win the game. The first quarter means we don't, but I think we should have won. So yeah, disappointed, but the performance still gives me some optimism. Cheers for watching, Bomber fans. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and go Bombers.